Welcome, listeners, to this audiobook summary of emotional intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ by Daniel Goleman. This summary dives deeply into the book's key concepts, structure, and arguments, weaving together its scientific insights, real-life examples, and overarching conclusions. The tone is engaging and conversational, suitable for an audiobook audience, while maintaining the depth and nuance of Goleman's work. Before enjoyed this video, and please remember to subscribe to receive notification of upcoming recordings. Introduction. Imagine a steamy August afternoon in New York City. You're stepping onto a bus, weighed down by the heat and the cranky mood it's put you in. But then, something unexpected happens. The driver, a middle-aged man with a wide, genuine smile, greets you with a cheerful, "Hi, how you doing?" You're startled. So is everyone else boarding that Madison Avenue bus. But as the ride goes on, this driver keeps it up, chatting about sales at nearby stores, a cool museum exhibit, even a new movie. Slowly, the sullen passengers transform. They smile back. They chat. By the time they step off, they're wishing him a great day. That's the memory Daniel Goleman carries with him, one that sparked his journey into writing emotional intelligence. Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. Welcome to this deep dive summary of Goleman's groundbreaking book. Published in 1996, it's a work that blends psychology, neuroscience, and real-world stories to argue something radical, that how we handle our emotions might matter more than how smart we are, at least when it comes to living a good, successful life. Over the next hour, we'll explore the 5 parts of this book, from the brain science behind our feelings to the ways emotional intelligence, or the lack of it, shapes our relationships, work, health, and even our kids' futures. Ready? Let's dive in. Part 1. The Emotional Brain. Chapter 1. What are emotions for? Goleman kicks off with a big question. What's the point of emotions? To answer, he takes us way back, millions of years back, to when our ancestors weren't sipping lattes but dodging predators. Emotions, he says, were survival tools, baked into our nerves over eons. And he's got a heart-wrenching story to prove it. Meet Gary and Mary Jane Chauncey, a couple on an Amtrak train in Louisiana's Bayou Country with their 11-year-old daughter, Andrea, who had cerebral palsy. One day, a barge slams into a bridge, and the train crashes into the river. Water's rushing in, and the Chaunceys have one focus: Andrea. They push her through a window to rescuers, saving her life. But as the car sinks, they don't make it out. Goleman calls this almost mythic courage, a selfless act driven by love so fierce it overrode their own survival instincts. Evolutionary biologists might call it reproductive success, ensuring their genes live on. But to Gary and Mary Jane, it was just love, pure and simple. That's the power of emotions, Goleman argues. They're not random. They're impulses to act, each with a job. Fear makes us flee, like when Goleman himself hit the brakes during a blinding snowstorm on a Colorado highway, avoiding a pileup he couldn't even see yet. Anger gears us up to fight. Blood flows to our hands, ready to grab a weapon or throw a punch. Happiness calms us, boosting energy for whatever's next. Even sadness has a role, slowing us down to mourn a loss, like a breakup or a death, so we can process and move on. He gets specific with the biology. Anger jacks up your heart rate with adrenaline. Fear shunts blood to your legs for running, leaving your face pale. Think blood runs cold. Happiness quiets worry, letting your body recover. Love and tenderness trigger a relaxation response, the opposite of fight or flight, fostering connection. Surprise lifts your eyebrows for a wider view, and disgust wrinkles your nose to block out something nasty. These aren't just feelings, they're physical playbooks, etched into us by evolution. But here's where it gets messy. Goleman introduces Matilda Crabtree, a 14-year-old playing a prank. It's 1 a.m., her parents are coming home, and she jumps out of a closet yelling boo. Her dad, Bobby, thinks she's at a friend's house. Hearing noises, he grabs his .357 pistol, creeps into her room, and when she pops out, bam, he shoots her in the neck. She dies 12 hours later. Fear hijacked Bobby's brain, firing before he could recognize her voice. It's a tragic echo of our ancient wiring. Fear once saved us from lions. Now it can kill in a split-second misunderstanding. Goleman explains this with our 2 minds. The emotional mind, fast, instinctive, rooted in the limbic system, came first in evolution. The rational mind, the neocortex, grew later, slower, and more deliberate. Usually, they're a team. Feelings feed thought, thought refines feelings. But when emotions spike, the balance tips. Take Goleman's friend, post-divorce, saying, "I don't care about him anymore," while her eyes well up. Her rational mind's talking, but her emotional mind's crying. It's why we're Homo sapiens, the thinking species, but often act more like Homo sentiens, the feeling one. Emotions, Goleman says, aren't extras. They're the engine of our lives, for better or worse. Chapter 2. Anatomy of an Emotional Hijacking. Now Goleman zooms in on those moments when emotions don't just nudge us, they take over. He calls it an emotional hijacking, and he's got a chilling example. It's August 1963, the day Martin Luther King Jr. gives his "I Have a Dream" speech. Richard Robles, a paroled burglar, breaks into an apartment on New York's Upper East Side, desperate for cash for his girlfriend and daughter. He's tying up Janice Wiley when Emily Hoffert walks in. As he binds her, Janice warns she'll help the cops find him. Robles panics. He grabs a soda bottle, clubs them unconscious, then stabs them repeatedly with a kitchen knife. "I just went bananas," he says years later, still in prison for what became the Career Girl murders. His head, as he put it, exploded. That's the amygdala at work, Goleman explains. This almond-shaped nugget in the limbic brain is our emotional sentinel. It's always scanning sights, sounds, smells for trouble. When it spots a threat, it hijacks the brain, acting before the neocortex can think it through. Robles didn't plan to kill. His amygdala hit the panic button, and rage took over. The aftermath? Regret. "I didn't know what came over me," he might have said, classic hijack territory. Goleman introduces Joseph Ledoux, a neuroscientist who rewrote the book on this. Ledoux found a neural shortcut. Sensory signals, like Janice's threat, zip from the thalamus to the amygdala in one synapse, bypassing the neocortex. A slower signal goes to the thinking brain, but the amygdala's already ringing the alarm. It floods the body with fight-or-flight hormones, norepinephrine, adrenaline, speeding your heart, tensing your muscles, locking your focus on the threat. It's why Robles lashed out before reasoning kicked in. Take another example. A woman drives 2 hours to Boston for brunch with her boyfriend. He gives her a rare art print from Spain. Perfect, until she suggests a movie, and he says he's got softball practice. Hurt and furious, she storms out and tosses the print in a trash can. Later, she regrets losing the gift, not the walkout. Her amygdala saw rejection, hit the gas, and overrode her rational mind. Goleman says this happens all the time, not just in murders or meltdowns, but in everyday blow-ups we wish we could take back. It's not all bad, though. Hijackings can be joyful. Think of Dan Jansen, the speed skater who vowed to win Olympic gold for his dying sister. After years of heartbreak, he nails the 1,000-meter race in 1994, and his wife's so overcome she needs medical help ringside. Or picture a guy in England strolling by a canal. He sees a girl frozen in fear, staring at the water. Before he knows why, he's jumped in, coat, tie, and all, to pull out a drowning toddler. His amygdala spotted danger and acted, no questions asked. Goleman digs into the brain's evolution to explain this. It started with the brainstem, basic life stuff, like breathing, in reptiles. Then came the limbic system, adding emotions, learning, memory. Smell kicked it off. The olfactory lobe sorted edible from toxic, mate from predator. Over time, it grew into the nose brain. Then the neocortex piled on top, our thinking cap. In humans, it's huge, letting us plan, dream, feel about feelings. But the amygdala's still wired and deep, with connections everywhere. Cut it out, and you're effectively blind. No fear, no rage, no tears. One guy, post-surgery, didn't even recognize his mom, feeling nothing about her pain. Ledoux's rat experiments seal the deal. He zapped their auditory cortex, then paired a tone with a shock. Even without the cortex, they feared the tone. Proof the amygdala learns and reacts solo. It's why we might flinch at a car backfiring years after a crash we barely remember. Goleman's point? The emotional brain's old, fast, and powerful. It kept us alive in the wild, but in today's world, where threats are more likely a rude email than a bear, it can misfire spectacularly. Wrap up. So what's part 1 telling us? Emotions aren't chaos. They're our evolutionary inheritance, designed to act fast and keep us going. The amygdala's our guard dog. Sometimes it barks at shadows. Sometimes it saves the day. Goleman sets up a tension here. We're stuck with a brain built for the Pleistocene, tackling postmodern problems. Bobby Crabtree's fear, Robles' rage, the Chauncey's love, they're all snapshots of that ancient wiring in action. This is just the start. Goleman's teeing up a bigger idea. If emotions can hijack us, can we hijack them back? That's where emotional intelligence comes in, but we'll save that for later. For now, think about your last blow-up or burst of joy. Was your amygdala driving? Mine sure was when I yelled at a slow driver last week. Oops. Part 1's a map of the emotional brain, and it's wild in there. Part 2, the nature of emotional intelligence. Introduction. Imagine you're at a cafe, watching a couple argue. She's fuming, voice rising, while he just sits there, calm as a lake, nodding and saying, "I get it. You're upset. Let's figure this out." She softens, they talk, and soon they're laughing. Or picture a kid on a playground, teased for dropping the ball, but instead of punching back, he shrugs, says, "Yeah, I messed up, want to try again," and keeps the game going. What's the secret sauce here? Daniel Goleman's got an answer: emotional intelligence. After showing us how the emotional brain can hijack us in part 1, Goleman flips the script here. He's asking, how do we tame that wild beast? How do we turn raw feelings into a superpower? In this section, he unpacks 5 skills that make up emotional intelligence, or EQ, and backs them with stories and science. Buckle up, we're about to get emotionally smart. The 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. Goleman starts with a bold claim: being smart isn't enough. IQ might get you good grades, but it's EQ that gets you through life. He leans on Aristotle's challenge from the Nicomachean Ethics. Anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. That's EQ in a nutshell, and it's got 5 parts: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Let's break them down. 1. Self-awareness, knowing what you feel. First up is self-awareness, knowing what's bubbling inside you, moment by moment. Goleman shares a snapshot of a friend post-divorce. She's telling him, "I just don't think about him anymore. I really don't care." But as she says it, her eyes well up with tears. Her words say one thing, her feelings another. That's a lack of self-awareness. She's out of touch with her own heart. Contrast that with someone who catches their anger rising during a traffic jam and thinks, "Okay, I'm ticked off. Let's breathe." That's the ticket. Goleman ties this to the brain. The neocortex, our thinking layer, can watch the amygdala's emotional fireworks and name them. Studies show people who label their feelings, like, "I'm anxious," instead of just freaking out, handle stress better. It's like having an internal weather report, cloudy with a chance of rage. You're ready for it. 2. Self-regulation, keeping it together. Next is self-regulation, controlling those impulses so you don't blow it. Think of a boss whose team botches a big project. Instead of yelling, he takes a deep breath, says, "This stinks, but let's fix it," and rallies everyone. That's self-regulation. Goleman contrasts this with emotional hijackings, like Richard Robles from part 1, who killed 2 women in a panic. Self-regulation is the brake pedal to the amygdala's gas. He digs into the science. The prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, dampens the amygdala's signals. Kids, whose prefrontal wiring isn't done, throw tantrums. Adults, well, most of us, can pause and pivot. Goleman cites a study of preschoolers given a marshmallow. Wait to eat it, and you get 2. The ones who resisted, distracting themselves, singing, scored higher on self-control years later as teens. It's learnable, and it matters. 3. Motivation, the drive to keep going. Then there's motivation, not just wanting stuff, but pushing past obstacles with zeal. Goleman brings in Dan Jansen, the speed skater. Picture this. Jansen vows to win Olympic gold for his sister, who's dying of leukemia. He fails in '84, crashes in '88, flops again in '92. But in '94, at the Winter Olympics in Norway, he nails the 1,000-meter race, sets a world record, and takes gold. His wife's so overwhelmed she needs a doctor ringside. That's motivation, grit fueled by emotion, not just logic. Goleman says this isn't about external rewards like cash. It's intrinsic, tied to passion. Brain-wise, it's dopamine at play, lighting up reward circuits to keep us chasing goals. Contrast that with the high IQ slacker who bombs out because they can't muster the drive. Motivation, Goleman argues, often beats sheer smarts. 4. Empathy, feeling others' feelings. Empathy's fourth, reading others' emotions like a book. Remember that New York bus driver from the intro? He sensed his passengers' gloom and flipped it with a smile and a chat. That's empathy. Goleman tells of a doctor who notices a patient's slumped shoulders and quivering voice, then gently asks, "What's really going on?" Not just treating the cough, but the despair. It's what keeps marriages alive, too. Picking up on your partner's silent hurt instead of steamrolling it. This ties back to the limbic system, especially the amygdala, which mirrors others' emotions. Goleman cites studies of babies crying when they hear another cry. Empathy's hard-coded. But it grows with the neocortex, letting us imagine someone's pain, not just feel it. Without it, you're the jerk who laughs when a friend's crying. EQ's kryptonite. 5. Social skills, playing well with others. Finally, social skills, using all this to connect. Goleman paints a picture of a manager smoothing over a tense meeting. "I know we're frustrated. Let's brainstorm solutions." Or think of that kid on the playground, turning a taunt into teamwork. It's not just charm. It's emotional judo, redirecting feelings for the win. He contrasts this with smart as dumb, high IQ folks who tank socially. Like the genius engineer who snaps at a job interview. "Why are you asking me that?" and doesn't get hired. Social skills lean on the prefrontal cortex coordinating with the amygdala, fine-tuning our moves in the human dance. Goleman says it's why emotionally savvy leaders outshine brainiacs who can't read a room. Tying it together, EQ in action. Goleman stitches these 5 into a fabric. Take a real example. A study of kids taught to spot emotions, like a furrowed brow for anger, cut playground fights by half. Or picture a couple where one says, "I'm mad," self-awareness, calms down, self-regulation, pushes to fix it, motivation, sees the other's hurt, empathy, and talks it out, social skills. That's EQ flexing its muscles. He doubles down on the brain. The prefrontal cortex is key, maturing into our 20s, which is why teens are emotional roller coasters. But here's the hope. EQ's not fixed. Unlike IQ, which Goleman says some see as a rigid genetic gift, emotional skills grow with practice. He nods to programs where kids learn to name feelings, proving we can wire ourselves smarter, emotionally speaking. Part 2's big punch. IQ's great, but EQ's the edge. Goleman's not trashing intellect. He's expanding it. The bus driver didn't need a PhD to lift a busload of moods. Jansen didn't calculate his way to gold. He felt it. Emotional intelligence, Goleman says, is the rare skill Aristotle dreamed of, and it's within reach. So, that's the nature of emotional intelligence. Goleman's handed us a toolkit: self-awareness to spot the storm, self-regulation to ride it, motivation to push through, empathy to connect, and social skills to thrive. It's not about killing emotions, it's about steering them. Next time you're about to snap, think, could EQ save this? Mine did when I didn't yell at my slow barista yesterday. Progress. Part 3. Emotional intelligence applied. Picture this. You're at a dinner party, and 2 couples catch your eye. One's bickering, snarky jabs flying, eyes rolling, while the other's laughing, finishing each other's sentences, sharing a quiet look that says everything. Or imagine a workplace. One team's leader snaps at a missed deadline. Morale tanks. Another's rallies the group. "We've got this," and they nail it. What's the difference? Daniel Goleman's got a theory: emotional intelligence in action. After mapping the emotional brain and defining EQ's 5 skills: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, Goleman now shows us where the rubber meets the road: love, work, and health. We'll explore real stories, hard data, and why EQ might just be the secret sauce to a good life. Let's roll. Emotional intelligence in action. Goleman's big pitch in Part 3 is that emotional intelligence isn't some abstract theory. It's the glue that holds our lives together. He breaks it into 3 arenas: relationships, work, and health. Let's unpack each one. Chapter 9. Intimate enemies. EQ in relationships. First stop, love and marriage. Goleman paints a grim picture. By the 90s, divorce rates were soaring, and he's got a hunch why. It's not about money or infidelity alone. It's emotional disconnect. He cites John Gottman's research, where couples were videotaped arguing. Take Leslie and her husband. She's upset he's glued to a video game, ignoring their kid. He snaps back, escalating fast. Gottman found a pattern. Couples who let contempt, eye rolls, sneers, creep in were doomed. Within 4 years, 93% of those marriages tanked. Contrast that with couples who wield EQ. Goleman describes one where the wife says, "I'm feeling ignored," self-awareness, stays calm, self-regulation, and the husband listens, "I hear you. Let's fix this," empathy, social skills. They de-escalate, repair, survive. It's not about avoiding fights. Goleman says all couples clash, but fighting smart. EQ lets you read your partner's hurt behind the yelling, cool the heat, and keep the bond intact. Without it, you're intimate enemies, as he calls it. Close enough to wound, too clumsy to heal. Chapter 10, Managing with Heart, EQ at Work. Next, Goleman heads to the office. The 90s were shifting, cubicles, teams, open plans, and raw IQ wasn't cutting it anymore. He tells of a manager whose team flubs a big report. The old-school type might yell, "You idiots," and watch productivity crater. But an EQ-savvy leader? Goleman imagines one saying, "This isn't great, but we're a team. Let's regroup." He motivates, empathizes, smooths ruffled feathers, social skills, and they deliver next time. He backs this with data. Studies showed emotionally intelligent leaders, those who inspire, not just dictate, boost profits more than brainiacs who can't connect. Take Peter Kaufman's research at Stanford. Heart attack survivors who learned to manage anger cut second attacks by 44%. That's EQ saving lives and bottom lines. Goleman contrasts this with the smart but dumb trap, like the engineer who aces tech but bombs interviews by bristling at questions. Work's not just about brains, it's about hearts, too. He ties this to the market. As jobs demanded collaboration, EQ became gold. The bus driver from Part 1? His cheer wasn't just nice, it was a masterclass in social skills, turning a bus into a community. Goleman's point, in a world of teams, EQ's the edge IQ can't touch. Chapter 11, Mind and Medicine, EQ and Health. Now, the big one, health. Goleman dives into mind-body science. Arguing emotions don't just feel good or bad, they kill or cure. Start with anger. He cites Gail Ironson's study. Heart disease patients who rage saw their heart's pumping efficiency drop 5%, a literal heart attack trigger. One guy, furious over a parking ticket, nearly proved it. Redford Williams tracked hostile types, prone to cynicism, quick to snap, and found they died younger from heart issues, up to 6 times the risk by age 50. Stress is another killer. Goleman shares Sheldon Cohen's experiment. Volunteers dosed with cold viruses got sicker if stressed, immune systems tanked. Med students under exam pressure? Same deal, more sniffles. Janice Kiecolt-Glaser found marital spats cut immune function. 2. Argue nastily, and your body pays. Depression's even worse. Nancy Fraser-Smith's study showed heart attack survivors with depression were 4 times likelier to die within 6 months. But here's the flip side, EQ heals. Goleman tells of optimists recovering faster from bypass surgery, motivation at work. Lisa Berkman's research found heart attack survivors with emotional support lived longer, empathy saves. David Spiegel's cancer patients in support groups outlived others by 18 months, talking out fears boosting immunity. Even confessing worries to a diary, per James Pennybaker, cut doctor visits. Goleman's own twist, that New York bus driver wasn't just lifting moods, he might have lowered blood pressure. He ties this to biology. Chronic anger or stress floods us with cortisol, wrecking immunity. Calm and connection dial it back. EQ, self-regulating rage, empathizing with others, acts like medicine. Goleman's not saying ditch your doctor, but that emotions are as vital as diet or exercise. Toxic feelings, he warns, are as bad as chain smoking. Balance is a shield. Connecting the dots. Across these chapters, Goleman's hammering one idea. EQ's not optional, it's essential. In love, it's the difference between divorce and decades together. At work, it's thriving versus tanking. In health, it's years added or lost. He's not trashing IQ, just saying it's half the story. The couple who talks it out, the leader who inspires, the patient who hopes, they're wielding emotional intelligence, and it's paying off. Wrap up. So, that's emotional intelligence applied. Goleman's shown us EQ isn't just theory, it's the pulse of our lives. From the bedroom to the boardroom to the doctor's office, it's what keeps us connected, successful, alive. Next time you're in a spat or stressed, think, could EQ turn this around? It did for me when I didn't snap at my late delivery guy last week. Small victories. Part 4, Windows of Opportunity. Imagine a toddler, trembling at the edge of a playground, too shy to join the other kids. His mom kneels down, smiles, and says, "It's okay to feel nervous. Want to try saying hi together?" He nods, takes her hand, and steps forward. Or picture a teen, scarred by a school shooting, who learns to breathe through a siren's wail instead of freezing in panic. These are moments of change, windows where emotional habits can shift. Daniel Goleman calls them opportunities. After showing us EQ's power in love, work, and health, Goleman now zooms in on when and how we can build it, especially in kids. We'll explore family lessons, trauma's lasting echoes, and why temperament isn't fate, all with stories that hit home. Ready to see how we grow emotionally smarter? Let's dive in. Shaping emotional intelligence. Goleman's big idea here is timing. Childhood and adolescence are prime windows to wire, or rewire, emotional intelligence. Our brains are malleable, and with the right nudge, we can shape lifelong habits. He splits this into 3 chapters: family, trauma, and temperament. Chapter 12, The Family Crucible, Lessons at Home. First up, the family as the emotional classroom. Goleman introduces Leslie, a mom upset her husband's glued to a video game while their kid cries. He snaps back, "Quit nagging," and their son watches it all. John Gottman's research shows kids soak up these vibes. If parents name feelings, "I'm frustrated, let's talk," and stay calm, kids learn self-awareness and regulation. Leslie's family? Not so much. Negativity breeds unease. Contrast that with a mom Goleman imagines. Her toddler's scared of a new babysitter. She says, "I see you're worried. It's okay. I'll stay till you're comfy." That's EQ 101, empathy and support. Studies back this. Kids with emotionally adept parents handle school better, fight less. Barry Brazelton calls these early bonds heart start. By age 4, they predict resilience. Neglect flips it. Goleman cites Mary Maine's daycare study. Abused toddlers ignored crying peers, empathy stunted. Abuse can echo across generations, too. Though it's debated, some kids break the cycle, but the risk's real. The brain's at play here. Early interactions tune the limbic system. Loving touch, calm voices, they build trust circuits. Harshness or absence, aggression or withdrawal. Goleman's point, home's the first EQ lab, for better or worse. Chapter 13, Trauma and Emotional Relearning, Healing the Wounds. Next, Goleman tackles trauma. Picture Cleveland, 1989. A gunman storms an elementary school, killing 5 kids. Survivors hid under desks, but years later, a car backfire or sirens still sent them shaking. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Or take a Vietnam vet. A helicopter where yanks him back to a crash, heart pounding, decades on. Goleman says trauma carves deep grooves in the amygdala, locking in fear. Joseph Ledoux's work explains why. The amygdala stores emotional memories independently, bypassing the neocortex. Rats shocked with a tone feared it even after cortex damage. Proof it's subcortical, indelible. In humans, Dennis Charney's team found PTSD rewires stress hormones. More CRF, fewer calming receptors. One vet, injected with yohimbine, relived a chopper crash in vivid hallucination. Another study, vets watching platoon numbed pain with endorphins, trauma's mark. But here's hope, relearning's possible. Goleman cites therapy, safe exposure to triggers, like a vet facing a siren with a counselor, shrinks flashbacks. The prefrontal cortex steps in, unlearning fear. Richard Davidson's volunteers lost tone-induced anxiety faster with active prefrontal lobes. Rats with severed ones took twice as long. Rachel Yehuda's study showed PTSD patients who processed trauma cut symptoms by half. Goleman nods to Judith Herman. Recovery means dosing pain, rebuilding trust. The amygdala holds fear, but the neocortex can soothe it, slowly, surely. Chapter 14. Temperament is not destiny. Nature meets nurture. Finally, temperament. Meet Tom and Ralph, two kids Jerome Kagan tracked. Tom's shy, new faces spike his heart rate. He clings to mom. Ralph's bold, strangers? No sweat, he's chatting. By adolescence, Tom's anxious, Ralph's fearless, temperament stamp. Goleman says it's biology. Shy kids' amygdalas overreact, bold ones underreact. Iris Bell found shy adults more stressed decades later. Chris Hayward linked it to teen panic attacks. But wait, Goleman's got a twist. Doreen Arcus watched moms with timid babies. Pushy ones, go play, kept them shy. Gentle ones, let's try together, ease them out. By kindergarten, those kids were bolder. Brain plasticity's key. Experience prunes neural paths. Marion Diamond's rats in rich cages grew thicker brains. Therapy for obsessive-compulsive disorder shifts metabolism. Goleman imagines a shy girl, coached to join a game, who by high school leads the team, nurture tweaking nature. The prefrontal cortex matures late, into our 20s, fine-tuning EQ. Alan Shore says early bonds attune it, neglect miswires it. Goleman's takeaway? Temperament sets the stage, but family and effort rewrite the script. Windows close, but they crack open, too. Connecting the dots. Across these chapters, Goleman's saying, childhood's critical, but not final. Leslie's son can learn calm if his parents do. Cleveland's kids can heal with help. Tom can outgrow shyness with a nudge. The brain's flexible. EQ's not locked at birth. It's a hopeful pivot from Part 1's hijackings. We're not stuck with our wiring. Wrap up. That's windows of opportunity. Goleman's handed us a truth. EQ starts young. Family shapes it, trauma tests it, temperament bends it. But it's not destiny. Next time you see a kid freeze or lash out, think, could a little EQ coaching turn this around? It did for my nephew when I taught him to breathe through a tantrum. Small wins. Part 5. Emotional literacy. Imagine a teenage boy, fists clenched, glaring at a classmate who bumped him in the hall. He sees a smirk, assumes a threat, and swings. Another fight, another suspension. Or picture a girl, slumped at her desk, staring blankly as her grades slip, too lost in despair to ask for help. Now think of a classroom where kids pause, say, I'm mad, let's talk, and sort it out. That's the gap Daniel Goleman's tackling in emotional literacy. After showing us how EQ shapes our lives and how it's built in childhood, Goleman now sounds an alarm. Kids are drowning in emotional chaos, and we can save them. We'll explore the crisis, its fallout, and the schools lighting the way, all with stories that hit hard. Ready to face the mess and the hope? Let's dive in. The crisis and the cure. Goleman opens Part 5 with a grim snapshot of the 90s, kids in freefall. He splits it into 2 chapters, the cost of emotional illiteracy and schooling the emotions, and it's a 1-2 punch of warning and redemption. Chapter 15, the cost of emotional illiteracy, youth unraveling. Goleman hits us with stats that sting. Teen arrests for violent crimes jumped 27% from 1980 to 1990, 430 per 100,000 kids. Murder rates quadrupled since '65. By 90, 3/4 involved guns. Suicide tripled for 15 to 24-year-olds since 1950, hitting 13.3 per 100,000. Depression? 10 times higher than prior generations. 10% of teens faced it, some as young as 6. Drugs, sex, eating disorders. Gonorrhea up 4-fold for 10 to 14-year-olds. 20% of AIDS cases tied to teen infections. 1 in 5 kids had mental health issues, worse than decades before, per Thomas Achenbach surveys. Why? Goleman points to a world speeding up. Latchkey kids with TVs for babysitters, parents stretched thin, violence normalized. Emotional illiteracy's the thread. Kids can't name feelings, let alone manage them. Take aggressive boys, like John Lockman's subjects. They misread a neutral bump as a taunt, lash out, and alienate peers within hours. Half become delinquents. Kenneth Dodge found they see threats where none exist, wired by neglect or chaos at home. Then there's Dana, a teen Goleman profiles. Her parents split, her mom's distant, and by 15, she's failing, friendless, depressed. She tells herself she's worthless. Helplessness sinks in. Maria Kovacs says depressed kids lag socially, emotionally. Dana's proof. Or picture rejected kids, per Stephen Asher. Ben, snubbed on the playground, drops out at triple the rate of peers. Add binge drinking, 20% of college boys by 20, and drugs. Cocaine use among black teens soared 13 times from 70 to 90. Goleman ties it to impulsivity, low empathy, EQ's absence. Poverty amplifies it. Greg Duncan's work shows poor kids face more stress, less nurture. Resilient ones rise above, but most struggle. Sexual abuse? Up to 32% of girls, 0.6% of boys yearly. Goleman's grim tally. A generation adrift, emotionally illiterate, paying a brutal price. Chapter 16. Schooling the emotions. The fix is in. But Goleman doesn't leave us there. He flips to solutions. Schools, he says, can teach emotional literacy. At Nueva School in California, Karen Stone McCown's self-science program has kids name feelings. Anger's a tight jaw, joy's a light step. Fights drop, grades rise. Seattle's second step, for fourth graders, role plays empathy. How's she feeling with a frown like that? Playground brawls plummet 50%. Head Start grads, taught self-control early, commit less crime later. High/Scopes data proves it. Goleman tells of a girl in Roger Weisberg's program, accused of pregnancy rumors. She learns to say, "I'm hurt, not mad. Can we clear this up?" Conflict solved, not escalated. David Hamburg calls these transitions preschool to grade school, middle school. Key moments to teach EQ. Linda Lantieri's New York classes cut tension with listening circles. Kids thrive when they feel heard. The science backs it. Carolyn Sarney says emotional competence grows with relationships. Schools can mimic families' role. Goleman cites W.T. Grant's prevention programs, teaching impulse control and empathy slashes drug use, violence. One study have depression in at-risk teens by teaching them to challenge pessimism. Gregory Clark's work. Even bullies soften. Coaching shifts their lens from "he's out to get me" to "maybe it's an accident." Goleman dreams big. Schools as caring communities, per Hawkins, where character, listening, cooperating, resolving conflict, joins math and reading. Thomas Lacona's push for moral conduct, Amitai Etzioni's civic skills, it's all EQ. The payoff? Less, make my day testiness, more have a nice day connection. Goleman's plea, don't leave kids' emotional lives to chance, teach them. Connecting the dots. This part's a wake-up call and a blueprint. The cost, crime, despair, dropout, is sky-high when EQ's missing. But Nueva's kids, Seattle's fourth graders, Dana with the right help, they show it's fixable. Goleman's not just diagnosing. He's prescribing emotional literacy as prevention, not cure. It's Aristotle's challenge scaled up, right emotions, right time, right way, for a whole generation. Wrap up. That's emotional literacy. Goleman's laid bare a crisis. Kids lost to rage, sadness, isolation, and lit a path out. Schools can be EQ boot camps, turning chaos into calm. Next time you see a teen spiral, think, could a lesson in feelings save them? It did for my cousin when I taught her to name her stress. Small steps, big wins. Conclusion. So what's Goleman's big pitch? Emotional intelligence isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline. IQ might get you into college, but EQ keeps you married, employed, alive. He's not trashing intellect, he's expanding it. The bus driver who turned a grumpy ride into a mini party had it. The parents who saved their daughter from a train didn't need a PhD, they needed love, fast and fierce. This book's a wake-up call. Our brains are old school, built for caves, not cubicles. But they're flexible. We can learn to pause before we punch, to hear before we holler. And we must teach our kids, because a generation adrift in rage and despair isn't just statistics. It's a tragedy we can stop. Goleman leaves us with Aristotle. Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, this is not easy. That's emotional intelligence. And it's why, in the end, it might just matter more than IQ. Thanks for joining me on this journey through emotional intelligence. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and please remember to subscribe to receive notification of upcoming recordings. See you in next video.